From NBC News senior White House correspondent Gabe Gutierrez, NBC News senior national security correspondent Courtney Kube, and retired Lieutenant General Mark Hertling, former commander of U.S. Army Europe. Courtney, you helped break this story. Walk us through the sequence of events and what we now know.
Yeah, so one of the big questions that we've had ever since the very first signal chat was exposed by The Atlantic several weeks ago was exactly whether this information was classified. Look, people like, I don't want to put words in General Hertling's mouth, but somebody who has been at the tip of the spear during missions and operations can tell you that specific information about an imminent operation, especially one that has already been ordered to go, would be considered classified, and oftentimes at some of the highest levels of classification in the United States military. And obviously that's to keep the men and women who were involved in that operation safe and protect the sanctity of the mission itself. Well, what we have now learned is that, in fact, the information that was provided by Secretary Hegseth in that signal chat was provided directly from the Commander of U.S. Central Command, General Ana Cabrera. And in fact, he sent that information on a classified system to Secretary Hegseth. And Ana, what we learned, according to these officials who we spoke with, was, in fact, Secretary Hegseth forwarded on that information on his personal phone on an unclassified signal app, a messaging app that many people use, frankly, but again, unclassified. Literally within minutes of getting that information, he sent that on the Signal app, not only to the Signal chat that National Security Advisor Mike Waltz had started, but also on one that the Secretary himself had started that, as we have now learned, included his wife, his brother, his personal attorney, and a number of his top aides. Again, the information was provided to Secretary Hegseth on a classified server, and he passed some of it on word for word on the Signal app, Ana.
Gabe, we just heard Hegseth's defense, but what's the White House saying about these new details?
Hi there, Ana. Well, the White House hasn't responded specifically to these new details that just came out this morning in Courtney's reporting. However, what we have been hearing from the White House repeatedly is that they think this is a non-story. They keep calling it an old story, old news, and a hoax, as the White House officials have described it, and President Trump did so yesterday. Now, this all comes on as the White House really tries to move on from this controversy. The White House officials I've spoken with insist that the president remains, that he's still standing by his Secretary of Defense. He said so as much publicly, and right now we have no indication he's backing off of any of that. Now, during his interview this morning, Secretary Hegseth once again seemed to be playing to an audience of one. He referred to the president as, quote, superhuman, basically comparing what he's going through now to some of the attacks that he feels that the president has undergone as well. So far from the White House, this does not appear to be shaking their confidence in the Secretary of Defense, despite all this controversy, and despite one member of the Republican Party, Don Bacon of Nebraska, coming out and really questioning Hegseth's leadership on it.
Courtney, what about the rank and file? Because you have these new details kind of reigniting this Signal controversy. There have been recent leaks, new firings. Is there a sense of dysfunction behind the scenes at the Pentagon right now?
Yeah, another one of the talking points we keep hearing from Secretary Hegseth and many around him, and even frankly as high up as the president, is that morale remains high in the military. The reality is, Ana, I've not seen any actual metrics or stats that prove that to be the case. About once or twice every year or so, the military will do these surveys where they'll talk about things like morale, but candidly, if there's one that's existed that specifically is talking about this issue and it's testing the morale in the military, it's not something that's been made public. One of the things that I keep hearing after the first Signal chat, but really specifically after this most recent one, which again, Secretary Hegseth created this Signal himself, and he is the one who added the people to it. Our people are asking about two things. Number one is accountability. The Secretary and many people around him have made it very clear that they intend to restore accountability to the military. And one of the issues that they frequently bring up is the withdrawal from Afghanistan. But another is leadership. People in the Pentagon, many in the rank and file, and who I speak with, are asking about whether this is a real show of leadership leadership here that the Secretary of Defense, look, he's not denying what has happened here, whether this shows the behavior of a leader by not taking accountability for his actions, Ana.
Courtney, Kube, Gabe, Gutierrez, keep digging, guys. Thank you so much. So, General Hertling, if details about a strike that you just sent over a secure system were then blasted out on someone's personal phone, what would you expect to happen? What would be your immediate concerns?
Well, I would look for an investigation immediately, Ana, and that's something that I think both the Pentagon and the National Security Council has pushed back on. They say they're going to do an investigation, and that Mike Waltz, the National Security Advisor, was going to be the one that really focused on it. I haven't seen that yet. And there continues to be, as Courtney just said, continued refutes of whatever happened. And no, we didn't do anything. We didn't have any classified information. Ana, I'm telling you, looking at what was on the device, that was sensitive information that affected targeting and a process by the U.S. military. And, you know, the news that came out this morning of it being transferred from what's called a SIPR computer, more than likely, Secret Internet Protocol Router. It's a type of computer that every single person that has any kind of access to classified information has on their desk, along with a regular computer that has unclassified stuff on it. On those SIPR computers, there are no access panels. So in other words, you can't put a stick into it or you can't copy it onto another computer. It's impossible to get into that computer. So when you're transferring that kind of information, I can conceive of how it was done. Whoever transferred it picked up their cell phone, went to the Signal app, looked at their screen on the SIPRnet, and then used just the voice data on the Signals app and basically say what was on that SIPR message, the secret classified message. Does it have a classified stamp on it? Confidential, secret, top secret? No, it does not. When it's on the net, it certainly does because it's part of a secret system. But when it goes on the Signals app, just the transfer by voice or taking a photo and pasting it on SIPR or on the Signals app would really condemn whoever does it of passing classified information. The other thing that I'd say is there's all the commentary about who it was passed to and whether it was classified or not. I'm going to go back to one important point. It was Signals. It was an unclassified system that you're passing this information on, and everyone in the Pentagon has been told, don't use Signals app. It's unclassified and it can be hacked. And anyone that knows the use of computer when they go overseas or when they're communicating knows that there are systems within different governments, the Russian, the Chinese, the Iranians, that can certainly hack into these systems.
And we have been told that the Secretary of Defense was warned about sharing any sensitive information over unclassified systems. You talk about this computer that is used to pass secure information. Clearly, there are ways to pass information along in real time without having to rely on a Signal app. Congressman Don Bacon, we heard Gabe mention, retired Air Force general. He's now the first Republican to break ranks on all this. He called it unacceptable. He says Hegseth is, quote, acting like he's above the law and that it shows an amateur person. Are you surprised more veterans in Congress, especially on the GOP side, haven't condemned this?
Well, I know Representative Bacon. He was a brigadier general in Iraq when I was there commanding a division. So he knows what's going on. You know, and in Iraq, we not only had the SIPRnet and the NIPRnet, the non-classified, but we also had a NATO secret rack. So you have 3 computers on your desk. Don Bacon was one of the planners in Baghdad that would see this stuff on a daily basis. And he knows more than most what would happen to anyone who leaked this kind of information. And coming from the phone of Secretary Hegseth, that was a leak. And it's interesting that he's condemning all the leakers within his administration or within the Defense Department, but he's not having that reflect back on himself. The word I use, Ana, you know, it's my favorite word. It's called sophomoric. It comes from the Latin sophomore wise and moros idiot. So you know enough to understand, you know enough to comprehend what's happening, but you really don't understand the implications of it, and that seems to be what Secretary Hegseth is doing right now.
And the Wall Street Journal editorial board said something similar, calling it a mess at the Pentagon, writing the staff infighting, dismissals, leaks over Signal app chats look to be the self-inflicted mistakes of a management neophyte. You think these are rookie mistakes that Secretary Hegseth maybe could grow into the job after all this?
Well, yeah, I certainly hope so. If he is kept on board, he has to grow into these things. The Defense Department is huge. There's a lot for him to learn. He just needs to open his ears and his eyes to learn it. But here's the one piece I'd also suggest. If General Eric Kurilla passed this to him on a SIPR computer, and then he put it on a Signals app, I got to tell you, if I'm General Kurilla in the field, I'm going to be very careful with what I pass my boss, because I don't trust him anymore to keep these kind of secrets until he shows that kind of trust. That's the kind of thing that Courtney was talking about in terms of the morale in the Pentagon. They don't know who to trust anymore.
Lieutenant General Mark Hertling, good to have you here. Thank you very much for joining us.